Today's guest is a defense tech entrepreneur with a background as a special operations officer in the 2nd Marine Raider Battalion, in business operations for Palantir, and as director of operations for Origin Materials. He's currently the co-founder and CEO of SMAC Technologies, which uses deep reinforcement learning and machine learning to accelerate critical decision-making from the command center to the front lines. Please welcome Andy Markoff. All right, Andy, thanks for coming today.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. Why don't you just start kind of by telling us a little bit about yourself? Who are you?
So Andy Markoff, co-founder, CEO of SMAC Technologies. I would say, before SMAC, I was a member of a cult known as the United States Marine Corps that I was in for 10.5 years. The brainwashing is strong there. But I was originally an infantry officer, went down and taught at the Marine Corps' Top Gun, which was actually learned a lot down in Yuma, and then took selection for MARSOC, became a Marine Raider, did the kind of usual deployments to Afghanistan, Iraq. I'm sure we'll probably talk about some of those a little bit more. And then got out 2016, went and worked at Palantir, was trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up, thought I was going to be a mountain guide. Realized I was too old to drag people around in the snow.
Yeah, those knees aren't that good anymore, are they?
No, knees was one of many bad life choices I made. And then made another one. I started a sports performance company with my wife. Who would have thought that working together would have been interesting?
Are you guys still married?
No, we're still married. We still talk to each other.
Congratulations, sir.
We'll never do that again. She's happily running that company, and it's way better without me. And I was like, sell software to the government.
There you go.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
And here we are.
I love it. Okay, so a lot to unpack there. First off, congratulations on saving your marriage and keeping your marriage.
Thanks.
Also, congrats on understanding that, your wife probably, if you start something with her, she should probably be running it because she can probably do it better than you.
Yeah, it was much better.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about your time in the military, and specifically, you've now already highlighted it twice, right? Like Palantir and SMAC selling software to the government. Were there things that you experienced in the military that you're like, holy shit, we should build a piece of software to solve this? Or was it hardware?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it crystallized in 2016. So I was a special operations OPSO for the Battle of Mosul in 2016 in northern Iraq. So running the kill chain for, Marine special operations teams, kind of like special operations teams across the joint force, and then actually NATO SOF. Every night we would get up, we'd get our target list, we'd build it manually on a whiteboard, then we'd build Gantt charts about it in PowerPoint. We'd use every version of Office 365 across SharePoint every morning, trying to upload it before the flight day started. Flight day would start, like everything would change. We'd throw the plan in the special filing cabinet called the trash can, and then just wing it. And I would say, I start doing math for Marines, which no one wanted me doing math for Marines, which is just, I would say, P for plenty, just add more, add one more Hellfire and call it good.
Yeah.
And and for me, Mosul was really the first time, in my career where we were somewhat both platform and munition constrained. We did not have enough munitions for everything we wanted to use them for. There were certain pieces of ordnance that we had to save for certain types of scenarios that we thought could happen. And just trying to do that live on a whiteboard on 1 to 2 hours of sleep and a pallet of Rippets was just not tenable. And we could kind of get by because it was ISIS, but I just remember being there has to be a better way than this. And so I got out. I was frustrated with a lot of things that I'd experienced, procedurally, that being one of them. I was like, I'm going to get out. I'm going to do technology because technology is how you fix this. I didn't even really know what technology meant.
Yeah.
And, kind of wandered around for a bunch of years, but I got to talking to Clint Alanis, my co-founder, in 2023. So I'd actually worked for Clint in Afghanistan back in 2014. And he stayed in, had a amazing career, finished out on a command tour in Okinawa, literally looking at the Indo-Pacific problem set and how do you close the kill chain in the context of the first island chain.
Yep.
And just being you can't with the current tech stack. And he and I started talking. He's like, look, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm running a sports performance company with my wife. He's like, how's that going? I was like, well, she's probably should run it on her own without me. And I need to go, she's firing me. I need to go figure out something else to do. And so he's like, well, we should work on this together because nothing's changed in a decade. And this is a really scary problem. And so we started talking about, all the things I'd been thinking about when I got out, all the things that he'd experienced recently, looking at it in this other theater. And that was really, fall of 2023, where kind of the idea to put SMAC together and run with it came together. We formed up in January of 24 and have been panic building for the last
but
almost
that's
2
the
years.
game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and you guys are moving really quickly. And I think one of the interesting things, and why I'm glad to have you on this show, is that as two former folks who are in the military, like you can provide a super unique perspective on like what the technology needs to be. I think that's why some of the bigger companies always try and gobble up guys when they come out, right? So that not only they can keep the relationship pilot on, but like if you empower those folks, you guys should be able to drive and build a really cool product based on what people need. Talk a little bit about that.
As far as kind of like how we think about it's interesting. I think a lot of the way we think about our like who we hire for growth or who we hire for mission ops is, my experience in the Marine Corps, granted, like 10.5 years, but it decays, right? Like your relevancy and your understanding of like the really, really nitty gritty details that make the difference between building something that is like exactly what the user needs versus kind of like, it's like kind of ish what they need, but not really is how recent is that experience. So I've had mine is decayed. At this point, Clint's is decayed, but his is more recent than mine. A lot of how we think about like who do we bring onto the team is we need to get people that are, not just working the problem set, they're instructors of the function of their fires instructors, their Top Gun instructors, their weapons school instructors. We want that caliber of person that has been in the schoolhouse, that's then done it recently operationally, so they have the knowledge, they have the network, and we pull them in. And the bet that we make, right, is that they're hungry to learn, that they want to fix it, that they'll learn the tech. And so we basically harvest the domain knowledge into the models that we're building while it's fresh, teach them the kind of growth side of things, teach them the product side of things. And then by the time like their, domain expertise is decayed a little bit, they picked up these other skill sets that they can go continue crushing for the company. And then we go get new ones and we pull them in. And I think a lot of the secret to, the technology that we're building is there is no way around like good human prior experience and figuring out how do you extract that, how do you encode it, how do you put that into the model. And like you need to have the right human domain experts. It's not everyone. Yeah. And so like that's a lot of how we think about hiring and how we basically use that and we pull it into the product. So
I actually jumped ahead there, and I want to apologize to anyone who's listening. Tell us a little bit about what SMAC builds, right? Because we got into the exciting part about how you actually,
So if I think about like, what is SMAC, we are the first frontier AI lab building for national security. And our mission is decision dominance. And so what I mean by decision dominance is how do we, take, petabytes of sensor data, other types of data, analyze it in real time and convert it into the right types of decisions across, the range of military operations. We've been heavily focused on how do you make the right decisions across the kill chain. And so I think, to kind of frame this, the military fundamentally makes decisions across 3 time horizons. They like, what do we do for the next 1 to 6 months? That's kind of like your deliberate time horizon. What do you do for the next 1 to 4 days within the context of that 6 months? That's your, next execution cycle. And then there's like all, the oh shit right now, what are we doing? But like dynamic cycle. And those horizons are planned. I mean, they're planned in different silos. The planning products don't talk to each other. And generally speaking, if I'm trying to plan, what do I do for the next 4 days? It takes me 4 days to do it. If I'm planning what I do for the next 6 months, it takes me 6 months. And if it's like dynamic, the good news is I have to make the decision right now. The bad news, it's Math for Marines, Andy wings it. And like, who knows whether that was a good decision or not. So a lot of like what we're building is domain-specific frontier models, not general-purpose models that can fill Instacart orders and fight World War III, like literally models that are only built to deter and, if required, win World War III that we've built, and then applications that allow users to leverage them and to leverage them across decisions and different warfighting functions. So whether that's fires decisions, maneuver decisions, logistics decisions, like the application allows them to like leverage the model and make decisions across those time horizons, but like in seconds instead of days, and in a way where you can make decisions at the edge that are informed by campaign level equities.
So I would say maybe until like 2 or 3 years ago, a lot of people would go put on their Hawaiian shirt when they'd go kind of end their career in Indo-Pacom and, drink Mai Tais by 3 o'clock. Let's talk about what we've seen from a change in like not only relevancy, but urgency in that theater. And then how you guys are trying to hopefully speed up and allow us to be ready for, let's call it a first and a second island chain conflict.
Yeah. I mean, I think people talk about the Davidson window. I mean, I think like, Admiral Davidson coined it when he was the Indo-Pacom commander. And it's this idea that I'm not saying that like conflict is likely. It's just more likely than I think any of us wish it would be. And the thesis is that it's more likely inside this Davidson window, so before 2027 or 2028. And the reason for that is because below the nuclear deterrence, so if we call this like sub-nuclear deterrence, like we're behind. Like I don't think no one wants nuclear war, no one wants any type of war, but if we assume that like no one's going to use nukes, and then we think about well, how easy would it be for us to win at the furthest end of our like logistics pipeline, at like the furthest end of our capabilities in China's backyard? I think it's a little closer than anyone. It's too close for comfort, and I think like the idea is that we won't be able to catch up fully to where we could handily win before 2027 or 2028. And so there's this like limited window of opportunity where like that China has. And I think there's another aspect of this, and I don't pretend to be a policy expert, but where there's internal pressures inside of China that makes it potentially more likely that reunification happens on that timeline. Those things kind of converge, and you have this like 2027, 2028 like window of like increased risk above what we believe it would be in like 2030.
I'm going to ask about machine learning and how that impacts like global power dynamics in a second. But
sure.
Did you see Xi purged 2 more dudes on his Joint Chiefs?
I did.
It's unbelievable.
It's nuts.
4 people in 3 months.
It's nuts.
1 person from the original appointed group is left, and it's like his, it's his chief of staff basically.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So more power, no Chinese leader has had this much power since Mao, and they purposely built the system to stop.
Yeah.
This from happening again. You know what I mean?
It's nuts. And you think about like that, you think about like the whole context of this backdrop of the window. And to me, like I never worked in Indo-Pacom. I never worked anywhere outside of CENTCOM for most of my time in. But coming back into the military from like the outside on the tech side, there is a sense of urgency there that is like felt like the sense of urgency we had about whether it's Iraq and Afghanistan. There's real like we need to like change. People are doing things differently, and I think Clint has even seen it like a change from when he was retiring out of the Marine Corps over like the whatever 6 to 7 months before he was back trying to fix a problem from the outside. Like there's a real urgency and desire to close that gap faster.
Do you feel that the Marine Corps, if there's a conflict, is going to deal with a brunt of this, at least to start with? Do you feel like they have the weapons, the systems, the software they need to be successful, or are they playing catch up?
I think that, I definitely think that on the software side, that's a lot of what we're trying to build. It's like we don't think they have it. We think that what we're building is like exactly what is required. And I think that's a lot of like what us and like everyone else in the ecosystems is trying to catch the Marine Corps Joint Force up. I think the interesting thing you asked about the Marine Corps bear the brunt of it is the Marines are interesting in that, I would argue, I'm a Marine, I'm biased, but it's really the only truly joint force inside the Joint Force. We have our own Air Force, we have our own like logistics wing, we have our own ground wing. And I think what that does is Marines are really, really, really good generalists. And I think if you look across the Joint Force and you look at any Joint Fire cell, they're like Marines on temp loan in all of them.
Interesting.
And they're kind of the glue for the Joint Force because we fundamentally understand integration and we really understand fires integration. And so the Marine Corps, and I say all of the Marine Corps is interesting, is that the Marine Corps, just like the rest of the Joint Force, doesn't have all the tools that it needs. But I also think that the Marine Corps understands like the joint integration. Probably Marines understand joint integration better than everyone else. And so it's almost like if you can give the Marines the software, the Marines are the ones on temp loan at the scenes across the Joint Force to kind of like help pull it all together. And
Dude,
so it's
don't
like an
tell
interesting
everyone
problem.
how you're going to conquer the world. Yeah, build the product that the glue guys need and then let them sell it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so it's literally like, how do you turn these folks into force multipliers? And so even if you don't have a Marine, you have the software that allows you to like, have the glue to run these different types of operations. Is that a fair way to explain what you guys do?
Yep.
Okay. So now let's like kind of go, that was like, 5-foot view, right?
Yeah.
Let's go 35,000 foot here, right? Talk to us about the importance of machine learning and AI. AI is completely overused in DoD, as you and I both know. But how important is machine learning in cutting the decision time down, right? Going to be with kind of all global power dynamics?
I think that so a couple of things. I mean, I think it is going to be, I think that if you look at all of, like, if I bucket like major issues we have, right? We need to rebuild the industrial base. We need to scale autonomy. I think like autonomy and like decision dominance are now like completely intertwined and related through this. I think like that piece of it is by far the most important. I'm not saying the industrial base isn't important. It is. It's just like, we're not going to rebuild it in 2 years.
Yeah.
We
Don't
can
throw that
choose
to my investors.
we can choose to. I think the decision dominance autonomy piece is attainable, and so from an importance perspective, we have to make decisions faster. I mean, if we take 96 hours to figure out what are we going to do for the next 96 hours, China could put 30,000 troops in Taiwan in that amount of time, and so like it doesn't work. And I think the speed that we can make decisions and outcycle, like whether they try and outcycle us, we try and outcycle them. Like that is going to be one of the deciding factors. And I think humans cannot be in the loop for every single thing that they're in the loop for today. Like the art and the requirement is what is uniquely required for a human to say yes to. How do I, give intelligent autonomy? How do I automate in the parts of the process that like is low value for a human that like we can trust a human not to be part of, surface options, let a human be involved at the key points where they're like still uniquely able to be, and then pull them back out of the loop so we don't get in the way. And I think there's not a right and wrong answer, but like that's a lot of like the problem is like, how do we figure out what we would call like intelligent autonomy?
Yep.
And I think whoever figures that out, the best is the strategic advantage.
I want to poke a hole in it for a second, and then I want to go and like talk about what China's openly saying they're doing. Yeah. So my poking a hole is, how do you keep that secure, right? Because adversarial machine learning is a real thing, right?
Yeah. As far as like, how do you? There's a lot to look at there. I mean, one. I'm going to go to kind of like the data piece of this, right? Like you have to. I mean. It's an interesting conversation we have about the technologies. I mean, like the models we're building are heavily reliant on. I would call them frontier models. They're not just reinforcement learning, just the way that like GPT-5 is not just a large language model, but we do index heavily on like the deep RL component of what we're building. And there's always this conversation of like, well, is it like online RL or is it offline RL? And I mean, I'm not going to tell you that it should be one or the other, but I would say that there are large advantages to training offline, and one of them is so that you can vet the data.
Sure.
And you need to. And I mean, because there's going to be, I would imagine, right, like plenty of purposeful misinformation sent out to mess up any models that we have, and you're going to need to vet, this is worth relearning from, this is not, and like that's like there's a whole industry around just like finding real world data before it like gets retrained on. And I think as far as like how we have thought about it, it's one of the reasons that we think that like there's a huge role for like offline learning.
Sure. I mean, there's also so much sensor data that we throw away because we can't actually process it fast enough to turn it into actionable data. I mean, you know this better than anyone from, you have a predator above you in Mosul, but they have to fly the hard drive back to Langley or wherever.
Yep.
And so you don't get the data for 72 hours, right? Or maybe you only get 10% of the data or something like that. Okay, so speed of data, trusting the data, those are really important things, right?
Yep.
When you talk to the end user, do they have an idea, or are they kind of asking industry for advice as far as like, how do we solve this problem where, and let's go back to just like, are we doing it in real time or are we doing it offline, right?
We've had a pretty extensive conversations with our end users about that. And I think that's one of the things that, in my mind, like that has helped us to iterate quickly and like kind of get buy-in has been, we've just been very like pop the hood up and show them what we're doing and see what they think. I mean, like, without getting into very detailed specifics, let's just talk about platform capabilities. So, I mean, we model platform capabilities. There are, ways to compute how effective this platform might be in this scenario, XYZ. And sure, like, a deep reinforcement learning model is a little bit of a black box. It's been trained on, synthetic training data. How do you learn to trust it? I'm like, at runtime, yeah, there's a certain element of it that is hard to audit, but I can show you how we trained it. I can show you the deterministic models about the platform performance that were used to train it, and I can show you all the variables. Like, here are the variables. Here's how we ran the calc. Tell them ahead of time, let's have a conversation for 3 hours, get your people that know how to do this. We'll all get in a room, and we're just going to show you what we're doing, and then you tell us all the things that you don't like, and we've done that. And we've changed things based off of that. And I think that like helps build trust where they can understand, okay, I get it. Like, yes, the calculator gives me 3 options when I push the button, and I don't fully understand everything that it considered when it does it, but I've seen how it was trained. I've seen the deterministic models that I can audit during training, and so I have more trust and understanding and keeping that line open.
Build the trust on the process standpoint so that you're comfortable with what the outputs they give you are. Yeah, I mean, okay, so first off, if people are listening to this and they don't understand that, like, a lot of times, if you don't have, either you have to have the credibility or you have to know people, like, to get access to the DoD. It's something that they're actively trying to change. That is a big deal and an inherent advantage you guys have over other people, because, again, you guys were veterans and you understand that. And I don't know if, like, people want to now build defense tech companies because it's cool and they see it on X, right? But, like, talk a little bit about how, I think the phrase like you said was, we're not defense tech tourists, right?
Yeah, I think the hard thing about building for this problem, if you haven't served or you don't have someone on the team that's served, I absolutely think that you can solve this by just having the right people on the team that have done it. You just need someone. What the context is, having banged my head at the schoolhouses teaching, Marine Corps doctrine, Joint Force doctrine is we don't follow our doctrine. And all of the Joint Forces doctrine is different and has different equities. I can assure you that, like, logically it doesn't actually all tie up. And so if you're just going to feed a model, I'm going to give it like the doctrinal publications and hope that it gets to a solution. I mean, it won't. And so there are trade-offs about, okay, we're going to do joint fires. The Air Force does it this way, the Navy does it this way, the Marine Corps does it this way, the Army does it this way. These are, like, not reconcilable. Like, there are different equities. You have to make an artful decision in a political, like an inter-service political decision on, we're going to build the UI like this. We're going to use this framework. I get that it's not how everyone does it, but we can have the conversations with the end user to be like, I get that you would do it slightly differently. We're doing it this way so that all of you can work together. And, like, we can kind of get to this, like, mediated user interface. It's just a specific example of, like, something that we can do that, like, if we didn't know the people and know the right people in the cells and hadn't served, like, we wouldn't have the credibility to do, we wouldn't have the connections to do. And that's how you end up, like, not quite solving the workflow. I think that's, like, one piece. I think, the other piece, and we'll talk about, like, a lot of what we're doing requires really, really deep domain expertise being embedded into the training environment. Yeah. How do you find the right domain experts? I mean, in the military, it's just like any industry. There are power users. There are people really, really good at certain skill sets. There are people that are not good at skill sets. And, like, how do you know who's who? And I think that's where we uniquely have the network where we can vet, like, the best fires person in Indo-Pacom for these systems is this person. And we want to talk to that person. Or, like, this person, has gotten out 2 years ago and was the person that, like, was the smartest on this thing. Like, can we talk to them and pull that knowledge out of their head? And I think just it's not rocket science, but it is a network. And I think we just really know who to talk to and who to pull that, like, key knowledge from.
How is it going up against, much bigger companies? When you build this type of technology,
it's been an interesting experience. I mean, I think it's just funny. Like, in some ways, I've come full circle. Like, and originally I was like, we need to, like, hide from all of them and, like, not tell them anything that we're doing. And then I was like, well, I can't do anything in this space if we don't work with them, because we basically will just be unable to do anything, because you'd have to work with the big companies and I was like, okay, well, it's stupid to not work with the big companies. We'll work with the big companies. We'll just work with all of them, which I still, and then, now you do see some of the angling where they see some of the, like, the upstarts coming up that they're, they quickly get sharp elbows.
Yes, but they do.
I think at the end of the day, I look at it as, like, we're all kind of frenemies. There's certain opportunities where it makes sense to team. There's certain where we're going to go at each other. And I mean, even I would say that the bigs do that, and that's just part of, like, the ecosystem. It's just it's thinking of it that way.
Do you guys have any strategics on your cap table?
We do not.
Yeah.
We do not.
Point, do you think you'll add some?
I've thought about that. I mean, I certainly could see doing it. I think it's interesting. I mean, I've generally avoided it out of fear of like just showing like them everything that we're doing, and then,
sure.
But I mean, but then I think about like what we're doing is so painful,
yes,
and so different than what a lot of these other companies are doing that I'm like, I just don't like actually believe that they would want to build it, because it's kind of,
and there's going to be so much space for software that works, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's just be totally honest. Right?
Yeah.
Like I think the market just has like created the story. I mean, you were at Palantir, right? That like Palantir is just going to be AI for defense, and Lattice is going to be, the CNC system for defense.
Yeah.
But then when you actually talk to end users, there's like that narrative, like you can say whatever you want to Wall Street or your investors, but what the end users decide is completely up to the end users.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Like they're picking software stacks. They're bringing in people. You and I, like, when you hear who like wins a contract, you're like, I wasn't even tracking they were building something like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep. 100%.
Yeah, it's been pretty fascinating to kind of see that.
Yeah.
Now that we're on the topic of fundraising, what's it been like raising money in this environment?
It's funny. I mean, before I started the company in like January 2024, I've never raised money. I didn't know anything about venture. I feel like it's just like wandering around the dark, like learning by
running
just getting
into walls,
shot in the face.
For sure. Dude.
I mean, we raised a seed with pre-product.
Mm-hmm.
With like a napkin, like with an idea on a napkin, and luckily have had investors that like understood the problem and could take the fact that like I speak in animal noises and acronyms and like translating that to like he doesn't know how to say this, but like this is what he means and this is actually important.
Yep.
So we've been really fortunate. I don't know. It's just like a totally different game. It feels like it's this weird, like everyone wants to hear how you're not going to go head to head with like the large incumbents. So if you run from that, then everyone gets worried that you're like going to be too niche and like the TAM isn't big enough. There's a lot of debate about do you do defense only? Do you do defense and commercial? So we've had a lot of those like conversations internally, but the whole thing's just been eye opening, and it's like this whole weird world that I never knew existed.
Are you guys doing defense only, or are you doing defense and are you going to do a dual?
So I think at the end of the day, I'll never rule out doing dual use. Mm-hmm. Some of this goes to just like, personal mission, personal capability. I mean, and Clint and I were just like, look, like you and I, we know what we are. Yeah. We're Marines. Like we see ourselves as warriors. Like that's the thing that like we always wanted to do growing up. We get out of the military and we're like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Like it's the thing I think about like every day. I just think that we are uniquely positioned to go hard on defense, and we could certainly sell what we're building commercial. There are absolutely commercial applications that could be generalized from what we're building. I just think that like our unique advantages in the domain expertise. And so our general, perspective has been do what you're really good at. And I think that's what we're good at. And I think early on it's really hard to do both. You can. There are people that have done it, but I think like I just worry about being spread too thin in an area where we're not as uniquely advantaged as we are in this domain.
I think too at the early stages while you're trying to find those first investors, like there are a lot of people who are defense tech tourists in the space, and they're like, well, no, you got to be a dual use company. Yeah. And then you start to question yourself, right? But if at the end of the day, like, DOD or DOW now is going to pay the bills. Yep. It does take some conviction, right? To be like, I got to Roger up. I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do from day one. And has that gotten easier, I'd say, as you've moved from seed to Series A?
As far as like being able to kind of like focus on like just
to be able to and to like tell your investor, like, I hear you, we're not ruling it out, but these guys are going to pay the bills for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think like we've been, I mean, I don't know if you say this to be nice, we've been really fortunate. And we've had really, really good investors. I mean, I have heard horror stories from like all my friends. I've seen horror stories of like investors like being part of like other companies. We have been tremendously fortunate, and I would say, in many ways, it's been reassurance and coaching from our investors. Like, dude, like you don't need to do commercial. Like, you guys are good. Like, you guys understand this domain. Like, do what you're good at. Like, do this. I think that the investors that we didn't get on the cap table that maybe we were chasing were the ones pushing on, well, what's your commercial play? The TAM's not big enough. The TAM's not big enough. And so I think, like, you know, we were fortunate that we ended up with the ones that we did and not the others, because they've been all very much like focus.
They self-selected out, man, right? And the good thing too is, like, if you can get a DOW contract and you get really sticky, especially as a subject matter expert like you are, when Claude, you know, Anthropic and ChatGPT destroy all the software jobs, at least you'll have something to pin your hat on. You know what I mean?
This is true.
All right. So, like, talking about that, right? Anthropic CEO this week at Davos basically said, you know, software engineers are gone in 12 months. Okay. Obviously, think of where he's at. Think of he's like going to be on a big stage. He's trying to probably push his next round evaluation. But what future trends do you see in software that's going to be super important in defense? You know what I mean? And you talked a little bit about, like, in the loop versus out of the loop, right? But what else you got?
I think you're seeing this actually both on the commercial side and the defense side. But I think, like, if the last couple years, like if we talk about AI and AI trends, and we look at the last couple years, like large language models and the performance of large language models have been like the last AI revolution. Like, I believe, and like the team believes, that really the next AI revolution is actually going to be the operationalization of reinforcement learning and modernized, right? Like, with like modern RL architectures that, like, you know, leverage the learnings from like the transformer system, et cetera. I think, like, that's kind of like the next big thing that really matters, because, like, fundamentally, like, large language models, I like to joke on the technical side, like, I'm like a really good large language model. Like, I sound, maybe we'll see if the audience thinks so, I sound like I know what I'm talking about technically. Like, I have no idea what any of this means. I just repeat what my engineers say and I learn to, like, put it together. Yeah. That's the large language models are, like, don't actually understand anything about military planning. They just look at, like, things that they've been fed and then they, you know, spit them back out. But they're terrible at, like, long-term goal planning. They're not even good at near-term goal planning. They're certainly not good at optimization. There's just this whole category of, like, complex decision-making problems, like, that technology, like, has just failed miserably at. And so I think reinforcement learning is actually the right technology for it. Why wasn't it used first? Was because it's really hard. Like, why is it hard? Because you need a training environment. What do you need in the training environment? Well, you have to model the physics of the problem. You have to model the decisions that could be made. You have to get good human prior experience, because otherwise you have to model the physics so perfectly that it's computationally intractable. Like, you have to have all three of those things. And that's really, really difficult to do well. And so I think you're starting to see people, you hear RL gyms are like the hotness, right? Like, you hear these, like, general purpose RL gyms, people building them for, like, financial modeling in the commercial space. You're starting to see this take off there in a general purpose way. I look at, like, what we're doing is taking, like, an infinitely more complicated problem and, like, doing that in support of the Department of War. But to me, like, that is really, like, the next phase of AI. And, like, the new training data is not, like, you know, labeled training data. It's actually, like, RL gyms and, like, the synthetic environment, the synthetic training data that they produce or scenarios that they produce is really the next thing.
Are you getting any indication that that's also how our adversaries, and we'll just keep it at China and Russia for this point, are thinking about things?
I can at least say that, like, they follow very closely the trends that happen in the United States. So you're seeing companies take off doing this. I guarantee that they're watching.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I would only expect that they are.
Yeah. So Chinese Telegram in the last couple of days has talked a lot about how they're basically everything the Chinese government has said, everything we're going to be testing now in the field, and again, take it with a grain of salt, is going to be human out of the loop. Like, we have to start pushing the boundaries to force the machines to make decisions, right? And or the software that's coordinating legacy systems to make decisions without us there.
Yep.
Because they're saying if we get enough reps, even if you have a human in the loop, we'll be able to out-decision you, right?
Yep.
Based on speed.
Yep.
And latency and all the other shit that comes in. What's your hot take, man?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, Andy's take is that we will play by different sets of rules for ethical reasons that make us different.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, yes, there is a huge risk that by keeping a human in the loop, that no matter how good you make the software, the model, et cetera, that maybe you would be too slow. I don't think it's black and white. Like, we should never have a human not in the loop. Like, there are scenarios where I would say that it is ethically acceptable to not have a human in the loop. It is a subset, maybe a significant subset of the range of scenarios. And I think that, like, the subsets of both sides are different. And I think that we should not do that. We should have a human in the loop for those reasons. Now, to me, that just raises the bar of, like, our accuracy and precision has to just be that much better that we can afford to. And I think it just raises the bar for us to make a product that's good enough that we can still win without having to do that, because I just don't think that that's the right answer.
So if you look at Ukraine and that conflict, right, we just had like a tier 1 guy who helped build a ton of like the drone stuff out there. And his comment was basically like exactly what you're talking about. And I'm going to impact it here in a second. But he's like, the reason you see all these deep strikes hitting oil fields and refining facilities and then military targets is like, you compare that to, like, this is a Ukrainian decision not to go after the Russian population.
Yep.
And it is not the same on the other side, right? They send, 10,000 shaheeds in glide bombs a night at like Kiev, right? And it's just literally just maximum death to like basically drive the population into surrendering, right? Okay, so basically it's like one side has guardrails, the other side doesn't really have guardrails when it comes to this. I had a conversation with some folks I know from Europe, and they were just like double checking if they thought this was a good idea. They're like, okay, so we know we're going to need AI on the battlefield, right? But we could be facing somebody who has no qualms of turning the guardrails off and just letting the thing fucking cook, right?
Yeah.
Do you think we should build like an inherent kill switch where we can turn our guardrails off and basically go full AI robot war? Was their question to me.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear what you think about that.
I mean, I think fundamentally, the level of autonomy should be a dial that, commanders, policymakers have the ability to make rules to dial, like 100%. Do I think that dial should ever be at like no human in the loop for like a large range of scenarios? Like, no. And part of my point is like, warfare, obviously, like there's the kinetic part. That's the part that we all focus on, but there's the other aspects of it, and there's the sentiment and the global sentiment. I mean, when you think about like alliances and like position in the world, it's like if you are going fully autonomous in a way that is like incredibly unethical, you may win a battle, you may win an engagement, you may win a campaign within multiple campaigns, but like you don't necessarily win the war. And I think that there's I do think that that's a real consideration where like there is sentiment and the information space that, makes room for having to be mindful of like the ethics, even for them. Like, I mean, we should, and I believe that we will, but I don't think just because they can do that and we don't means that it's like this massive advantage for them either.
I mean, depending on the reports you read and what you know, they would say Israel turned on their AI target recognition and they ended up leveling Gaza.
Yeah.
Right? Like literally they hit every single building because every single building became a target, right?
Yep.
Now, can we validate that they actually did turn that thing on and then panic and turn it off, which is what, I think Wall Street Journal and New York Times are talking about. But if it was on and now you look at global sentiment for Israel, right? I don't think anyone argued before after October 7th, there was going to be response.
Yeah.
I think people would argue that the type of response that came out, and again, I am not picking sides here, but you just look at global sentiment and they've lost the hearts of the world. And that's maybe a real example of how this could work. You know what I mean?
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Let's have a lighter question here. Right.
Sweet.
And we'll wrap it up. I'm always curious how intellectually curious people learn and what they read and what they consume. How do you learn new information?
Yeah, so I find that I have to do kind of like a real deep dive where I almost like go neglect all of the other parts. So fundamentally, I believe like I'm an integrator, so I need to be a generalist in a bunch of different stuff. But in order to do that, I have to go deep enough in a particular thing to know enough about it to be able to even integrate it.
Yeah.
So I feel like my general way I do this is I'm like, okay, let's talk about reinforcement learning.
Sure.
I don't know anything about it, so I'm going to go bother our head of reinforcement learning, have him give me, here's the books you should read, here's the MIT online courses you should take, here's the Coursera courses you should take. And then I basically neglect other like duties for like a month and a half to like deep dive as if I'm going to try and become an expert.
Yeah.
And to the point where like I understand the lingo, I understand the framework, I understand enough to kind of like understand like the pieces that have to come together. And then I kind of think about, okay, is it now worth investing, going even deeper, or do I need to go deep on some other thing I do? But I find like I read, I take online courses. Frankly, online courses like MIT OpenCourseWare and Coursera have been like a go-to for me for like a wide range of things over the last, since getting out, whether it was financial modeling or reinforcement learning. There's a lot of really good stuff out there, and I just usually ask people on our team, be like, hey, if you had to teach me, if I were working for you as like your junior engineer, like what would you make me go read?
Yeah.
And I just go read it.
Have you heard of the MIT Pirate degree?
I haven't.
Okay. So you do a lot of MIT stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, and I guess this is like a degree you can get. It's like sailing, shooting, sword fighting. They only give a couple out a year because everyone wants to get the degree. Maybe when you're $1 billion company, they'll give you, because you've just shouted out MIT, they'll give you an honorary pirate degree.
That would be excellent. The Marine crayon eating degree.
Hey, dude, you're good at that. You got a PhD in that.
I do. I'm very good at digesting them.
Yeah. Man, thanks for coming by today.
No, thanks for having me. This is a blast.
Yeah. Hey, you guys are building a really cool product. And I think what's the most interesting for me is how, like, because you lived it, and like that story you told us at the beginning about how you would make decisions, if you can automate that or lower the cognitive load for the end user to make better decisions faster, it'll just make us better and more efficient as a warfighting system.
Yeah, so we're certainly trying.
Yeah, man. Awesome. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Drone Wars podcast. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe to catch all the latest insights for all things defense and geopolitics.